Picture a Saturday evening, 31st December 1977. You're 10 years old and the house smells of roasting potatoes and something warm and sweet, maybe a tin of Quality Street already cracked open on the sideboard. The telly's on in the corner, the curtains are drawn tight against the frost, and for one night, just one, you're allowed to stay up past midnight. Britain in the 1970s was a complicated place. Power cuts, the 3-day week, strikes on the docks, the miners, the bin men. There was tension in the air most of the year. But New Year's Eve? New Year's Eve was different. For one evening, all of that fell away.
This strike holds. We won't back down.
Aye, but the cold bites deep.
We endure for our
families. This is the story of how Britain saw in the new year during one of the most turbulent decades in living memory. And somehow, despite everything, it was magical. The preparations started early, not with a shopping app or a same-day delivery. You'd been to the co-op earlier in the week, or maybe Fine Fare, loading up a wire basket with twiglets, a block of cheddar, a bottle of Advocate, and a litre of lemonade for the snowball your mum would make later. Proper party food. Modest by today's standards. Absolutely sufficient for the time. By 7:30, the living room had been rearranged. The good chairs pulled forward, a cloth on the coffee table. Dad might have a bottle of pale ale, or perhaps a small Bell's whiskey. Mum had her baby cham glasses ready, the little plastic stemmed ones with the deer on the side. Out came the tinsel. Up went the streamers, the Christmas tree still standing, fairy lights blinking on and off. This was the whole event. There was no going out for most families. Babysitters cost money. Taxis were dear. The pub was an option for the menfolk, maybe, but for the family, you stayed home. And home was enough. At around 8 o'clock, 28 million people, roughly half the entire population, settled in front of their televisions. There were only 3 channels in 1975. 3. BBC One, BBC Two, and IF. That was it. No remotes for most households. You got up, turned the dial, and hoped for the best. And BBC One delivered. The Hogmanay celebrations beamed down from Scotland were a staple. Andy Stewart in a kilt, a Sealed band ripping through Strip the Willow, men and women linking arms in formations nobody in England could quite follow, but everyone enjoyed watching. There was something gloriously other about it. Then came the variety shows. Mike Yarwood doing his impressions of Harold Wilson and Edward Heath, the audience howling with recognition. The Generation Game earlier in the evening, Bruce Forsyth grinning that enormous grin. By 10 o'clock, Morecambe and Wise might have a special on, and if they did, nothing else existed for that hour. There's a woman, let's call her Margaret, from Wolverhampton, born in 1934, who remembers New Year's Eve 1970 as the best of her life. Her husband had just come back from a long stint of overtime at the car plant. They had a bit extra in the tin. She'd bought a new dress from C&A. He had new shoes from Dolcis. Their 3 kids were allowed to stay up, and the eldest, 14 by then, was given a small glass of something fizzy and pink. We danced in the kitchen, she said, just us to the radio. I don't think we even had a record on. It was just whatever was playing. And it was perfect. That's not a story about wealth. That's a story about presence. About being there, fully, with nowhere else to be. Let's be honest about the cold, because you can't talk about 1970s Britain without it. Central heating was a luxury in many homes. Fewer than 30% of British houses had it in 1970. The rest made do with a single gas fire in the lounge, maybe a 2-bar electric in the bedroom if you were lucky. You dressed in layers to watch the telly. Slippers on, cardigan over your pyjamas if you were a kid. The windows ran with condensation. The bathroom was an ordeal, and yet, gathered around that one warm room, with the fire glowing orange and the television murmuring, the cold outside only made the inside feel better. That contrast. The bitter frost pressing against the glass, and the six of you in one room, warm and together. It sharpened everything, made the moment feel earned. By 11, the tension was rising. Kids struggling to keep their eyes open, Dad topping up his glass, Mum shushing everyone as the BC cut to Big Ben. The crowd in Trafalgar Square, thousands of them, bundled up in donkey jackets and duffel coats, breath rising in clouds in the winter air. The chimes began. 1, 2, 3. In living rooms across Britain, people stood up. You don't know why, nobody told you to, but you did. Glasses raised, kids jumping. Someone banging a saucepan lid in the kitchen next door, the sound muffled through the terraced wall. Auld Lang Syne. Every year. Hands clasped, arms crossed, swaying slightly. Hardly anyone knew all the words past the first verse. It didn't matter. You sang it anyway. Outside, the street briefly came alive. Front doors opening, neighbours on doorsteps calling across the road. A bottle rocket going up somewhere, illegal, probably, and definitely bought from a dodgy stall at the market. The smell of cold air and distant gunpowder. And then, within 10 minutes, everyone back inside. In the north of England, and Scotland especially, first footing was a genuine ritual. The first person to cross your threshold after midnight was supposed to bring luck for the coming year. Dark-haired men were considered the luckiest, a relic of older superstitions about Viking raiders. Some said. The first footer was supposed to bring symbolic gifts, coal for warmth, salt for flavour, bread so the household would never go hungry, and a coin for prosperity. A boy called Tommy from a street in Newcastle remembers being sent out into the cold at 5 past midnight, aged 12, clutching a lump of coal wrapped in newspaper to knock on his nan's door down the road. She always acted surprised, he said. Every year. Like she hadn't been waiting for me. She always had a mince pie and a glass of ginger wine ready on the other side of the door. These things mattered. They connected people to something older than television, older than the charts, older than Harold Wilson or Edward Heath or any of the troubles of the decade. And here's the thing. Here's what actually hits hard when you look back at it now. The 1970s were genuinely difficult years. Inflation hit 25% in 1975. There were food shortages. Rubbish piled up in the streets during the winter of discontent in 1978 and 1979. The decade had real grinding hardship in it. But on New Year's Eve, none of that was allowed in. The door was shut against it. And behind that door, in the warm, small, crowded room, people found something that doesn't really have a name. Call it togetherness. Call it resilience. Call it the stubborn human refusal to let the grey win. You made the best of what you had, and what you had, mostly, was each other. By 1979, things were shifting. Margaret Thatcher won the election in May of that year, and a new decade was coming with new promises and new divisions. The decade that had seemed so grey was giving way to something noisier, brasher, more individualistic. The terraced streets that had buzzed with neighbourly New Year noise would slowly grow quieter as people retreated into private lives and private pleasures. But in that moment, standing in the frost outside your front door at 1 minute past midnight on the 1st of January 1978, the cold biting your cheeks, the sound of singing fading back through someone else's window, it didn't feel like anything was ending. It felt like belonging, like being exactly where you were supposed to be. We had less than most people have now. Less money, less choice, fewer channels, fewer gadgets, fewer options. But somehow it felt like more. If you experienced New Year's Eve in 1970s Britain, the Baby Cham and the Advocate, the 3 channels and the Sealed on the BBC, the First Footing and the Frost, you know exactly what I mean. If this brought back memories, Share it with someone who remembers. Those stories deserve to be kept alive. Please subscribe to keep these stories alive. There are so many more of them, from the school dinners to the seaside holidays, from the market stalls to the Saturday afternoons at the football. Britain has a story worth telling, and we'll keep telling it together. Drop a comment below with your favourite New Year's Eve memory from the 70s. The stranger the tradition, the better. We read every single one.